Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Nick, and in today's video I want to talk about geckos and structure of geckos and what does it mean. So let's get right into it. So when we talk about structure, what we're talking about is the overall body structure, the head size, and the crests. If the crests are pointy or not, or if they flop or not, or whatever. So let's kind of get in there, and I'm going to get out a couple geckos and show you guys the difference between the structures, and then I'll tell you if I think structure's a good thing or a bad thing, or if you need it or if you need to worry about it or not. So let's get into it. Okay guys, so what I've done here is I've actually pulled out some of our breeders, and I just kind of want to show you the structures on them. This is Waylon. As you can see, Waylon has good head structure and decent body structure. He's got a nice wide body with a nice big head. You can see my finger kind of fits there. So that is what we would kind of call good overall structure. So now let's move on to Billy. Billy's our quad stripe male, and if you look at his crests, you can see that they somewhat flop over. So that's kind of like loose right here. Now this isn't necessarily a floppy crest gene or trait, but he does have nice big crests, and he also has a big head. But the difference is you can kind of see on his head, it kind of becomes more of a triangle shape. So that's kind of a difference in structure from Waylon to Billy. Billy's body overall is a tad thinner. Even though they both weigh about the same, Billy just has a less girthy body. Looking at Mr. Butterworth here, you can see that he also has a big head, and he has a good body size. His crests are not quite as floppy as Billy's are, because Billy's actually hang down a little bit, but he definitely still has really good points around here on his crest. So Jessie here, she has a ginormous head, awesome crests, and really good body structure. She really maintained weight very nicely, and she kind of keeps this nice shape pretty much even when she's gravid. So now Betty here, she's part of our tricolor and extreme Harlequin project. You can see her head is drastically smaller, and her crests are fairly they're not as floppy as some of the other ones are. And then the last one we'll move to here is Louise, and Louise kind of falls somewhere in the middle. Her head's not as big as Jessie's, but it's bigger than Betty's. But her crests are a little bit less than Betty's are overall. But she still has good body structure. Okay guys, so now that you've kind of seen some examples of some of our geckos and what's good structure, what might be lacking a little bit, we need to talk about what determines the structure, right? So what determines structure is genetics, incubation, and incubation temperatures. So if you have two geckos that each have big heads or big bodies, as long as the incubation process goes well and you're not incubating at too high of a temperature, so you're incubating somewhere at like 70 to 73, then you're more likely to get a gecko that has better overall structure. Some breeders think that if you incubate at like 70 or 71 and the eggs go into the 100-day mark or 115, 130-day mark, that's whenever you get your biggest, healthiest geckos, because they've had the longest time to grow and the longest time to absorb as much yolk as possible. And that's definitely a factor. And then like I said, genetics, if you breed two geckos together that have small heads, you may just get small-headed geckos. But when it comes to body structure and the crests, that seems to be a little more genetic than not. Obviously, you'll get into, are you properly taking care of it? And assuming everything is taken care of correctly and fed well, and fed on time and misted properly, then most of the likely you're going to have a bigger bodied gecko if the parents are bigger bodied. So now let's talk about, does structure matter? Yes and no. It depends on what structure you're asking about. If you think that big-headed geckos are the only healthy geckos out there, then you're wrong. Big-headed geckos are just a line of gecko that has been strengthened over time. The same thing can be done with a different shaped head, because there's tons of shaped heads. A lot of geckos in the wild though, I mean every color and big head, small head, anything you see, that's all mutations that have happened over time. And through picking out specific lines of this gecko, even if it came from the wild and it had the biggest head in the wild, that's still a mutation, but we can breed that back, and now that's why we have big-headed geckos or big-bodied geckos. So the structure of the head matter, in my opinion, no, not really. I have geckos that have fantastic structure, big heads, and then I have geckos that have fairly normal sized heads. So now let's talk about, does body structure matter? I think that body structure matters more only because if you have a female, I would like for my females to be at least 40 grams whenever they're laying, and then I'd like them to maintain that 40, and typically that comes with having good body structure and good lineage of, you know, their mothers having good bodies and yada yada yada. So that's something that is kind of more important to me than big heads. And then the other thing too, though, when we talk about structure, the important thing to remember is that you want your geckos to be as healthy as possible. I like my females to be a little bit bigger because I think that they bounce back faster, so body structure matters to me. If you're dealing with a bigger bodied gecko, then odds are it's going to have a pretty decent head structure anyway, and maybe some nice crests on the side, just because we're kind of to that point in the hobby. It seems like, you know, if you're buying from a reputable breeder or somebody who has good stock options in and they're producing very nice animals, then that's more important than, to me. I see a lot of, like on Facebook, a lot of beginners get way too caught up in like, oh, that's a small head, that gecko's not worth anything. It's like, well, it's not how it works. You can work with multiple lines. Not everybody wants their gecko's head to be the size of a what's it called? A $quarter or whatever those are called. Like, not everybody wants that. Some people just want it to be the size of a quarter. And those geckos are just as healthy. Some people want it to be a little smaller. There's all different shapes and sizes of heads, just depends on what line they come from. Boop. Alright guys, well that is the video. I hope you liked it. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, stay safe and stay positive. Smile at somebody.